สวัสดีครับต้อนรับเข้าสู่สุทธิชัยไลฟ์ภาคพิเศษนะครับผมต่อสายตรงไปที่วอชิงตันเพราะว่าศาสตราจารย์จอห์นลอเรนซ์มีประสบการณ์ในสภาผู้แทนราษฎรสหรัฐถึง38ปีนะครับทำงานเป็นสตาฟของที่นั่นแต่ว่า8ปีหลังเนี่ยเป็น Chief of Staff คือเป็นหัวหน้าฝ่ายปฏิบัติการของประธานสภาล่างเลยนะครับแนนซี่เพโลซีฉะนั้นมีประสบการณ์การเมืองมากประสบการณ์รู้เส้นสายวงในของการเมืองในรัฐสภาอย่างยิ่งตอนนี้เกษียณแล้วครับ Professor Lawrence ก็เป็นอาจารย์สอนอยู่ที่มหาวิทยาลัย University of California ที่อยู่แคมปัสอยู่ในวอชิงตันฉะนั้นเป็นวงในการเมืองจริงๆครับ Good morning in Washington John Lawrence
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be with you today.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time to talk to me so that you can explain what is happening to American politics today to the Thai people here. What if, you meet a foreigner who just, run into you and ask you, what is happening to American politics, John? How would you explain it to him in simple terms?
Well, I'm not sure there are a lot of simple terms. I just returned myself last night from a week in Scotland. And what I was struck with was that in great contrast to all of my other international trips that I've made around the world, including to Thailand on several occasions.
Oh, yeah?
No one asks any questions about American politics. And I think that's unusual. And I think it's disturbing because I think it is indicative of a very high level of concern that people from around the world have. And that is a concern that's shared by many people in America, and not just by Democrats, but by many across the political spectrum. It's not unusual for there to be partisanship in American politics. In fact, I've just completed a book that's going to be published in March that talks about the history of partisanship in politics. What is unusual is the very high degree of polarization that has occurred. That is, that the partisanship and the political extremes have really come to reside in the two parties, so that you have a very, very weak political middle in America. Yet, as you know, most successful legislating does not occur on the extremes in a democracy. It occurs in the center, where you have to cut deals in order to accommodate enough people in the middle that they're comfortable with the policies that are going to be implemented. And what we've seen really very dramatically emerging in America over the last couple of years has been an unwillingness of people to venture towards the middle because you tend to be punished by going to the middle politically, financially. And so it means that we have two political parties that are increasingly ideological based, with a lot of independent money able to back up their positions and able to intimidate people from venturing too close to the middle. And as a result, not a lot is being accomplished in American politics right now.
And you will see all these extreme feelings, extreme expressions in politics, on the extreme right and extreme left. What is going to happen to the middle ground then?
Well, it's very difficult to predict. What I like to say when I speak about this subject is that politicians, like most of us, like to do things that reward them. Not that punish them. And so there have to be some greater rewards that are established for venturing towards the middle, as opposed to liability in the form of either political challenges or financial attacks or media attacks. If you are constantly punished for venturing into the political middle, for playing that compromise role that moderates on both party and within each party have traditionally played, then it's going to be very, very difficult to accomplish anything and to build up that middle again. So we have some serious structural issues. And of course, they are being exacerbated by a president who is very unusual in that he does not have traditional connection to his own party or certainly not to the Democratic Party. He is willing to forego any of the traditional behavior that we have seen from other presidents designed to build a compromise and build conciliation. He's even been willing to very vigorously attack his own party leaders in the Congress, which seems to be not a very good prescription for the kind of legislative success that most presidents at the beginning of their term are interested in achieving.
Yeah. You spent 38 years as a staff member in the U.S. House of Representatives and last 8 years as Chief of Staff of Speaker Nancy Pelosi. What is the most frightening thing that you see now compared to the experience you have had in the 38 years as an insider in politics?
I think it's this atomization that's occurred in politics. We've been talking and writing about the political divide that has occurred within the parties for some time, and that's reflected in the Congress, and it's particularly been reflected in the House of Representatives. Increasingly, it has spread to the Senate. And now the unique piece of that is that the president himself seems to be increasingly estranged from Congress, from his own leadership in the Congress. And so you have a dysfunctionality in the American political system. The American system is based upon a separation of powers, where certain powers are reserved to the executive and some to the legislative and some to the judiciary, and they all also have the ability to check the other. And that works well in terms of preventing extreme activity, but it works very, very dysfunctionally when those three branches are not interested in cooperating. They have the capacity for simply creating stalemate, and that seems to be where we are right now. They're not interested in just checking the excesses, but of checking any activity whatsoever on the other branch.
Are you suggesting that Donald Trump has broken the checks and balances system in the American political establishment?
I don't think it's a question of him breaking it. I think that because it's not really within the power of the president to do so, but certainly in the way in which he has been governing, he is demonstrating a profound lack of interest in the traditional relationship between the executive and the legislative branches of government, relying almost exclusively on executive orders to achieve policy goals, and not working in a collaborative fashion with his own majority in Congress. I mean, it's not unusual that there's a lot of tension between the president and the Congress, particularly when there is one party in control of the White House, the executive branch, and one party in control of the Congress. What's unique about this situation is that one party, the Republican Party, is in charge of both the White House and the House of Representatives, and is still a very dysfunctional situation. The Democrats are in the minority. There's very little the Democrats can do to advance their own legislative agenda. What is unique is that the president seems to have no capacity whatsoever to work with his own Republican leadership in the Congress to accomplish whatever legislative goals they have, and that's been reflected certainly in the failure on their efforts, their long efforts to try to change the Affordable Care Act, President Obama's law. But this is going to become a very serious problem in the next several weeks, because there are certain deadlines that are built into the American political structure that must be resolved by September the 30th, specifically having to do with spending and debt that allow the government to simply function. And the president typically is going to have to work very closely, not only with the majority, but with the minority, because the minority's role is greatly enhanced when you run up against these sorts of deadlines. If these bills are not passed by September the 30th, then the U.S. government shuts down, and that has very, very profound implications, both financially and operationally. And if the debt ceiling is reneged upon, of course, that can really have disruptive impacts in terms of not only the American potential security, international finance. So these are coming up in only 4 weeks. It requires a lot of very careful and skilled negotiations to make sure that you hit these deadlines. We've seen none of that between the president and the Congress in the last 7 months.
You don't see any real sort of give and take among the House of Representative members and senators on both parties? You don't think they know how to avoid a shutdown? They have had experience in the past.
Yeah, I think that the Congress is probably going to develop its own legislation and send it to the White House. I think that the White House will largely be out of this debate, and that is illustrative of how the two branches have been functioning since January 20th, when President Trump took off. The president didn't send any legislation on health care. He just left it in the hands of the Congress, and the Congress wasn't able to pass it. He just had heard that the president does not intend to send a tax program to the Congress, a tax reform. He's that in the hands of the Congress. So my guess is that on the issue of these appropriation bills and the debt ceiling bills, he will also be willing to just let the Congress work out whatever deals they work out, and then send him the final product, and he'll sign it. He doesn't seem to indicate a great deal of interest one way or the other in the detail. Where he's thrown a bit of a complication into the puzzle is that he has said that he will not sign appropriation bills unless they include about $1.5 billion to build this wall that he wants to build between the United States and Mexico. He's actually indicated, I believe, that he might veto that legislation.
Is that a bluff? That might be just a bluff, the wall thing.
Yeah.
No?
I don't think there's any way the president's going to veto a bill and shut down the American government over the idea of building a wall between Mexico, particularly because remember, when he ran for president, he said that this wall would be paid for by Mexico.
Yeah, he said that.
So,
yeah,
of course, Mexico has no intention of paying for the wall. But how do you explain to the American people that you're shutting down the American government because you won't have the taxpayers of the United States pay for the wall? The Congress won't provide that money. When you said yourself that the taxpayers wouldn't have to pay anything to pay for the wall. It makes no sense whatsoever. So my guess, you're right, that the Congress, as it has in the past, will work out this legislation on its own. It will probably work out on a bipartisan basis because there's a significant number of Republicans, particularly in the House, who will not vote for either a debt ceiling bill or for the appropriation. And so the Speaker and the Majority Leader, Mr. Speaker Ryan, and Majority Leader Senator McConnell, they will have to depend on Democratic votes to come over and pass that legislation. But key here is that legislation isn't real policy. No. That's just filling up the gas tank. It doesn't tell you where the car is going to go. It may be characterized as an accomplishment, but it's really nothing more than as I say, filling up the gas tank. It doesn't really tell you anything at all, other than the government hasn't down. Now what are you going to do?
Well, to claim that the budget to build a wall could shut down the government is unthinkable. But Donald Trump has done many unthinkable things in the past few months. So anything could happen.
Yeah, the problem about being a historian, which is what I was trained as before I went to work in Congress, is that people think that you know exactly what's going to happen. I tell them, well, actually, historians tell you what happened in the past.
Right.
Historians don't like to predict the future, and I have generally found, beginning with my prediction that Hillary Clinton could not possibly lose the election last November, that I've put aside any political prediction that I've tended to make in the past, because I found that the president is not behaving in predictable and traditional ways.
No, but
we're trying to be diplomatic.
Okay, I'm not asking you to make predictions, but people outside the United States like us wondering whether Donald Trump can survive 4 years, can really, keep his job for the full term. And some of my American friends say, that is also a question. It's not unthinkable that he might be out of office before 4 years. What do you think?
Well, I think some of that is wishful thinking on the parts of people who still can't figure out how he won the election.
As an historian, you don't think it is possible because history had never recorded such a precedent. But you were also saying that anything could happen. You cannot predict a man like Donald Trump.
Yeah. So I think there are two issues here. One would be a political environment that might come to exist that where he just makes a decision himself that he doesn't want to stay in office, and that. I suppose that could happen less so from a political than potentially from a legal standpoint. There is this special prosecutor who is looking into a very wide range of activities by the president and by his campaign and by people in the House staff.
Right.
And I suppose you could find a situation where the president might make a determination that he would not want to remain in office, or that it might even be worthwhile to resign the office as part of a deal. But we're a very long way from that happening. We don't even know that there's going to be any indictments of anyone. We just have an investigation. So I think that's getting ahead of things.
Yeah.
From a legal standpoint in the Congress, the Congress can impeach the president and remove the president.
Yeah.
But that's a very rare circumstance in American politics.
Right. Yeah.
It's never occurred.
Never. You had never successfully impeached a president. Either the president resigned before the vote, or he got enough numbers to keep him in office. But this might be a new president. Historians are not used to new president, right?
Right, that's exactly true. Now there have been two circumstances where the presidents have been impeached. That is, the House of Representatives basically votes to indict them. That is what impeaching is, and that was President Andrew Johnson in 1868 and President Bill Clinton in 1998. But in both cases, the Senate, which needs 2/3 votes to remove him from office, declined to convict. So I think it's very hard, unless President Trump were to do something extremely illegal. I don't think there's politically disagreeing with the president, that 2/3 of the Senate would do that. And my former employer, who's the former Speaker, Nancy Pelosi from California, she has discouraged talk of impeachment, as she did, for example, with President George W. Bush when the Democrats won control of Congress, and some people wanted her to push for impeachment over which the president became engaged in the Iraq War. And she said no. I think wisely she said that impeachment should be a very, very rare situation, not based upon a political disagreement, but really on a serious violation of. I think where President Trump is more difficult there. I think the Congress is reasonably easy to predict, that outside some grievous of the law. It's very difficult to foresee the president.
Even if the special prosecutor investigating into the Russian connection, even if that committee finds that Donald Trump somehow was related or involved in illegal connections with the Russians, you don't think that is serious enough for the process of impeachment to begin?
Oh no, I think that if the special prosecutor were to come in with an indictment that specifically makes findings about the president, or about even people very close to the president, that could be a very difficult situation for Mr. Trump, because the Congress does not operate on the same standard as a criminal court, so the court may or may not make a determination that they're guilty of a crime. Those are pretty high constitutional standards.
Right.
But the standards for impeachment are high crimes and misdemeanors, and they aren't really defined. Different legal scholars and constitutional scholars have different interpretations of what that means. But my guess is what it means is that when a majority of people in the House of Representatives decide they don't want the president to stay in office, they find some high crime and misdemeanor that they want to remove him from. Now, he's got a very strong base of support in the Congress, but circumstance that you mentioned could potentially change things. The other thing that could change things is that if it really looks as though, and there are some indications of movement in this direction, that the president is so weakening the Republican Party in terms of the 2018 election that they feel, members there feel a compulsion to separate themselves from him in order to save their own neck, which politicians worry about a great deal. That could be different.
The midterm elections might produce that kind of a setback for Trump, right?
Yeah, and if the Republicans feel that the appearance of their coddling the president and protecting the president is really damaging their own majority.
You're right.
And then on top of that, you get an indictment or a finding from the special prosecutor about illegal or questionable activity. Then I would say I would be very hesitant to predict what might happen, because I think that members of the Congress could get very, very nervous. But by and large, in answer to your larger question, if I had to make a prediction, and as I just said, I don't like to make predictions. If I had to make a prediction, as difficult as it is for me to say, I suspect that the president will just continue to do what he's doing for the next 3.5 years. I have to say, it's difficult to foresee how that can a
lot of people wish that would happen. A lot of people wishing that could happen, but do you think realistically it is possible or probable?
I think it's I would not base any strategy, either domestically or internationally, on an expectation that the president doesn't serve a full term in office. I will say that it's very difficult to see how the American public, let alone the American political system, endures the kind of daily chaos and disruption that it's seen in the last 7 or 8 months. It's the rare day that goes by that something doesn't happen that just completely shocks people, or whether it's having to do with the president or the president's staff or the president's criticism of the Congress or revelations about the president's campaign or his business activities. Almost every single day something happens. And, at some point, it's tired.
The latest is the pardoning of former Sheriff Joe Arpaio, right? Someone said in Washington that this is an impeachable offense. You don't think so?
Well, I think we have to look into. We'd have to look into that. I was involved with some pardon activities, and there is a formal process that you go through when you seek a pardon on someone's behalf.
Yeah.
The president did not do that in this case.
No.
He does have the ability under the Constitution to pardon without having to go through that process. The Constitution doesn't say anything about the pardon attorney or pardon reviews. It says the president has his pardon.
Yeah.
The issue that you raised comes about if one can make the argument that the pardon was used for the purpose, for example, of interfering with a criminal investigation. So in the case of Sheriff Arpaio, the president apparently asked the attorney general, and this again is a very dubious thing to have done, whether or not he back off the prosecution of the sheriff for violation of civil rights of people under his custody. And the attorney general said, you don't want to do that. Let the justice process go forward. The sheriff was convicted, and then the president pardoned him.
Yeah.
He pretty clearly has the ability to do that. But where he could get into trouble with pardons is, for example, if he were to pardon one of the former campaign officials, like a Paul Manafort, or he pardoned his son-in-law over activities that they were being investigated about.
That could be really troublesome, right, for him?
Yeah, they had not been indicted or convicted. Then the pardon itself looks like an obstruction of justice. It looks like you have intervened in the judicial process for the purpose of preventing a prosecution. And that could, I think, get you into some trouble. But he hasn't done that.
No, but he might do it. You never know.
You don't know. And certainly his willingness to pardon this particular sheriff, who it's not a question that this sheriff just had hostile feelings around undocumented immigrants to the United States. He was found to have kept people in really subhuman conditions in prisons, denied them food and clothing. I mean, this was a very serious charges, and he was convicted of some very nasty activities. It's not as though he were convicted of a political offense, but he were convicted of something minor. And then for the president to come in and just pardon him sends, I think, a very, very, very negative message to the criminal justice system.
Okay. Last question. Is America losing its democratic values? Can we still think America as a democratic country?
Oh, I think that the American political system is much stronger than Donald Trump. And
I hope so.
I'm thankful for that. I think that this dysfunctional presidency that we have, and even to some extent the dysfunctional Congress. I think that you'll see a sorting out in the Congress. It's interesting. You're starting to get some interest, particularly in the Senate, on the of Democrats and Republicans try to work together around some ways to address some health care issues. There will have to be some bipartisan efforts around the spending bills and the debt ceiling, and I wouldn't be at all surprised if you saw the same around tax policy, maybe even immigration policy. I think what will happen is that the legislative branch will, as it has 40 or 50 years, will seek to reassert itself, particularly in the face of a weak president. And to successfully reassert itself, any legislative body that is represented will have to find ways of working collaboratively and working towards the middle, and that will reinvigorate democracy.
I still have hope in America. I still have a lot of hope in the American system that it could survive Donald Trump. I think.
I'm confident it will, and to be honest about it, it is one of my great hopes that our friends around the world, including in Thailand, are aware of that
yes.
they don't lose confidence in our country, that
right.
they don't lose confidence in the American people.
Yes.
Our alliances, our
yes.
trade
yes.
And military
right.
commitments, and particularly our commitments around human rights
sure.
And
sure.
democratic rights around the world,
yeah.
those are not shaken by Donald Trump. I guarantee that.
Okay. Thank you very much, John Lawrence, for the insights into Washington politics, and I hope to be able to invite you back again when things, happen in such a way that foreigners need some explanation from people like you.
I'd be delighted to do that anytime. And thank you so much for inviting me to participate.
Thank you, John. You can go back and watch this clip in Facebook, my Facebook page. It is safe in there, and you can watch it again. Thank you very much, John.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Good luck to you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
นี่ครับจอห์นลอเรนซ์คนนี้มีประสบการณ์การเมืองมากเลยครับเป็นคนที่ทำงานให้กับสสเนี่ย U.S. House of Representatives 38 ปีเป็น staff member ที่รู้เส้นสนกลในข้างในและ8 ปีก่อนที่เขาจะเกษียณเนี่ยเขาเป็น Chief of Staff คือเป็นหัวหน้าปฏิบัติการให้กับประธานสภาหญิงของเดโมแครตเลยนะครับ Nancy Pelosi ฉะนั้นผมก็ได้รับคำแนะนำจากเพื่อนบอกว่าคนเนี้ยรู้เรื่องการเมืองอเมริกันดีมากก็เลยชวนมาพูดคุยให้พวกเราทุกท่านได้ฟังไม่ได้แปลให้ฟังคำต่อคำนะครับหวังว่าหลายๆท่านที่ฟังแล้วเข้าใจว่างๆผมก็จะสรุปให้ฟังครับแต่ว่า9 โมงมีนัดหมายกับคุณวิชามหาคุณมาเล่าเบื้องหลังของการทำคดี G2G จำนำข้าวที่ท้ายที่สุดออกมาเป็นคำพิพากษาของศาลที่เป็นประวัติศาสตร์วันก่อนนะครับรอ5 นาทีครับเดี๋ยวจะกลับมาครับขอบคุณครับ